The African Union closing its annual summit yesterday by condemning the recent wave of military coups that have happened in an unprecedented fashion over a number of countries. Now, the member states suspended some of these countries from the bloc. This has spurred fears that top leaders, or should I say top officials, describing the democratic backpedaling less than 2 weeks before the summit began. Burkina Faso becoming the fourth country to be suspended by the AU after disgruntled soldiers toppled the president there, Roch Marc Kabore. Now, the Guinea, Mali and Sudan also currently suspended from the member countries. Now, the insurrection, or should I say insurrections, were among the main issues raised at the two-day summit, although leaders from across the continent also had heated discussions over the AU's ties to Israel.
At no time in the history of the African Union have we had 4 countries in one calendar year, in 12 months, being suspended. Mali, Guinea, Sudan, and latest, Burkina Faso. And they use this occasion, this opportunity in their deliberations to condemn the attempted coup against the government led by President Mbalo of Guinea-Bissau.
Right, let's try and have a discussion now around this. The bloc has also called for greater representation at the United Nations. Africa remains poorly represented at the UN Security Council. Let's speak now to Professor Siphamandla Zondi from the Institute of Pan-African and Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. Professor, good morning to you and thank you very much for your time. You've heard just some of the issues I've listed in the introduction as some of the matters that were discussed at the African Union Summit at the weekend. But if reports are anything to go by, the leaders of the member states there grappling with the issue of how Israel was allowed to be granted member status in the African Union when it would seem that some of the countries are opposed to this decision.
Good morning, Tony, and really it has been a widely watched and a significant African Union summit, partly because it has positioned itself to really talk about building resilience in communities against food security and other issues, but also because a number of controversial issues have come onto the table, including that controversial decisions by the chairperson of the AU Commission, who is effectively the CEO of the AU, to grant Israel, about whom the AU and OAU have major critical resolutions and observer status, and apparently without consulting the member state through the Executive Council and through the Assembly of Heads of State, which has then led to this debate that seems to have taken place with this summit and led to a compromise position whereby a small committee of countries need to look at this and the procedures taken to take this decision, understand all of this, and submit a report to the next assembly, which will then vote most likely or decide how to deal with this, and with some pushing for this to be rescinded, and others argue that you proceed, you keep the observer status. It's not a major issue, but in political terms, it is a huge, huge issue, giving some legitimacy to the state of Israel in a continent that is very critical of its treatment of Palestinians.
Yeah. Powerful countries, Professor, are opposed to this decision, and I say powerful countries within the AU umbrella, countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria. My understanding is that if this decision is not reversed, some suggestions that what if they were to withhold their fees towards the AU? That would somehow cripple this particular institution. What are your thoughts around that, and what is the possibility that that might come to pass?
Yes, a large number of, actually the vast majority of Southern African countries, some West African countries, and a large number of North African countries are opposed to the decision on substantive terms, which is the AU, OAU have taken very strong positions against the occupation in Palestinian territories by the Israeli state. Until that changes, their positions don't change. But there's more countries that are now opposed to the decision purely on procedural ground, whether the CEO of the organization, which is the AU Commission Chair, has the mandate and the power to take a decision which effectively changes the policy direction of the entire organization. So they are simply procedural. It's not political or ideological, but it's about that. Those two groups come together to do that. If they threaten to not surrender the contributions, they would ground the organization to a halt, which is why we have this compromise position, which has a combination of both countries in it, on a factor of 3 against 2, to deliberate on this and submit a report to the next summit.
Professor Zondi, you have countries like Mali, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso that are grappling with the issue of coups, and some might be justified in saying that how is it that the heads of state were locked in a decision about the admission of Israel or the granting of Israel the observer status at the African Union, when in fact they should be dealing with how on the continent there seems to be more and more coups taking place?
Yes, we must be careful in making that argument. We must be careful that we are not taking what goes to the media as the only things that are discussed, and that which did not get covered by the media as something that was ignored.
Yeah.
We know that the coups, all of those coups, were on the agenda. The decisions about it we don't quite know, because those who report on the sidelines of the AU did not take it as newsworthy perhaps. But as the communique of the AU summit comes out, we will notice that there will have been decisions on all of this, including the theme of the meeting, which is resilience, building resilience against food insecurity, the major issue in many parts of the continent, seriously aggravated by COVID-19, including the decision to elevate the status of the African Communicable Diseases Center, which coordinated quite proficiently the response to COVID-19 into a full agency of the AU, almost like a World Health Organization of the AU, as the World Health Organization is to the UN. And there are a whole lot of other decisions that are going to be very important for us to grapple with. And it is definitely not likely that they simply just discuss the Israel issue and not for the whole, that whole 2 days, and ignored all the issues that were submitted to them by the Executive Council of Ministers, which kind of brought up about 14 issues that needed decisions.
Yeah. Prof, perhaps you touched on one important factor. I'm not saying that all the other factors aren't important, but perhaps the one that is pressing at the moment is that of food insecurity that you've touched on. We are also grappling with issues of climate change, and this is a subject that was raised by our very own president who was participating, but this was in a closed session, I understand.
Yes, Scotty. You know, this African Union, African Unity, this integration project, this creating of a huge bloc of countries is meaningless unless it leads to the improvement in the quality of lives of people who call themselves African. Anything else that is done might sound nice, might be a vanity project. The AU's biggest challenge is the extent to which they are able to justify the existence on the basis of what it does to help people fight poverty, inequality, underdevelopment, and in many ways that it manifests itself, including on food security. So we must watch out for what decisions they make, what is new in the decisions they make. My big cry is that the African Union has always been confronted with this huge ability to dream, huge ability to aspire, but very low ability to translate the aspiration into reality. Yeah. And that's perhaps one of the biggest drawback. And I don't know whether this summit has given the AU greater capacity to implement great decisions it makes year in, year out.
Professor Siphamandla Zondi, thank you very much for those insights. He is from the Institute of Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg.